Welcome back, everybody. Outed, Chapter 1. Monday, 5 days before the apocalypse. Mitch. Sliding on the oil blanket under my truck, I placed the oil pan under the engine to catch the oil as it drained. A bright and hot day in Dead Man's Butte, or the Butte as most people called it, or the Butte of the Southwest, which we did back at Montgomery Memorial High School. Those were not the good old days. I reached under the 2009 Chevrolet Silverado, bought and paid for, finally, and adjusted the oil pan to catch the last drips. More than 200 stickers and counting were plastered across the vehicle. My truck was a Picasso masterpiece of white paint, rust, and every screamo band sticker I could find. Mine, even if the hood was a replacement I found from a green truck, or if the passenger side door was gray with primer. Some mariachi music blared as a car passed. I had pulled in front of the Parker house, about 15 minutes away from my house, and had the freedom to work on it here. My best friend, Jared Parker, lived here with his mom, Edna. Single-story, yellow brick house on a yard that couldn't decide if it were a junkyard, a weed patch, or a lost piece of desert. Most places around the Butte were xeriscape to look natural and save on water. Not my parents' place. They had a lawn. My hair flopped around my face. My hair is the only thing about me that looks good and I'm proud of. Hanging to my waist, I dyed it black every month or so to hide my blonde roots. Some days I braided it, others I let it fall free. Or I have a few black hair ties to pull it back. I could do man buns, but that's not my style. One of my old boyfriends once braided it like pigtails before we made out. He threatened to blackmail me because I looked so silly. I pulled out the hair tie, pulled the hair back into the ponytail, and retied the tie. Another hot day in the Butte, and I wiped my face with the end of my shirt. Welcome to the Mojave. The Suicide Queen screamed from my truck. I kept the volume low because I don't want the neighbors complaining. Most people didn't appreciate my music. Jared's neighbor, old Mrs. Jackson, drove into the carport next door and popped her trunk. She had crammed at least 100 bags in that poor little Civic. Mrs. Jackson must be 80 by now. Still drove, walked 2 miles every morning, cooked and tended her yard. African American, silver-haired, she defied anyone who called her old. She did like a little help with lifting things, like groceries. Running over, I opened her car door. Need a hand? Oh, sure, Mrs. Jackson said, and climbed out, chuckling. You should move in with the Parkers. You're here often enough. She grabbed a couple of bags and headed to the door. At least Mrs. Jackson didn't complain about my music. She just fiddled in her Godzilla-sized handbag, found her keys, and unlocked the door. That would be nice. That is the one thing we both agree on. I grabbed as many bags as I could and took them to her porch. Mrs. Jackson leaned against her old door, pushing it open, set her bags inside, and walked back to the car. Truck having problems again? I grabbed a few more bags and took them to the porch, just changing the oil. Taking the last of the bags out of the trunk, Mrs. Jackson closed it and beeped the car to lock it. Wouldn't it be easier to take it to some shop? I carried the last of the bags to the door. Maybe, but this is more fun. See you later. Thanks for the help. Walking back to the truck, I glanced at the pan. The oil still dribbled. Picking up my backpack, black of course, like everything I own, I took it to the shade of the porch, sat on the stairs, and pulled out my test kit. First, an antiseptic towelette to clean the oil off my hands, and followed by blowing on my hands to dry them. Then, prime the lancet, get a test strip ready, insert the test strip into the meter, wait a second for the meter to turn on, and aim the lancet at the middle finger, press the lancet button, and the lancet pricked my middle finger, squeeze the finger to get a little drop of blood, place the blood drop onto the test strip, wait 10 seconds or so, suck on the finger to clean off any blood, out pops the reading. If the kids in high school didn't think me weird already, they'd love this. The vampire sucking his own blood. Not fun times. Back in high school, my dark hair and pale skin earned the nickname the vampire of Dead Man's Butte. It didn't help that I avoided most people, and could get around that old school faster than anybody else. I didn't want to socialize, and I didn't want people bumping up against me. They might discover the bruises. I learned one thing from high school, and from Donna and Bailey. I couldn't rely or trust on teachers, or administrators, or parents, or coaches, or counselors, or clergy for anything. Only a very select group of friends. The meter beeped. Damn. About 20 points too high. I had been careful today, too. Next, I pulled out my diabetes journal and recorded the time and reading. The dietitian had said I wouldn't have to be paranoid forever, just until I got used to the process. It's been 11 months, and I'm still not used to the process. Flipping through the journal, I glanced at the little blood smudges or the endless food lists and carb counts and glucose entries and notes I'd found on the internet. Usually, I only tested 4 times a day, 2 hours after each meal and right after karate. In the beginning, it seemed like I had to poke every finger every day. I could play connect the lancet dots on my left fingers back then. Still could. Sometimes I would line the lancet up and make little constellations out of the dots. I got pretty good at making the Big Dipper. The kids at school called me a freak. My dad called me worse. But it amounted to the same thing. Yeah, I'm a freak. At least the journal kept me sane. It's become more than a collection of my readings, but also my life. I packed up the backpack and left it by the side of the door. The oil had stopped dripping. I pulled out the pan, crawled back under the truck, and replaced the bolt. Then I poured the oil into a metal can in the back of the ugly truck, and it was ready to drop off at the mechanic's. I refilled the oil and made sure it didn't drip. A year ago, I hadn't tightened the bolt all the way, and a little teensy tiny drip escaped. Bailey, my dad, had been beyond pissed. My grievous sin? I left an oil stain on Bailey's perfect driveway, next to his perfect, brand new Beamer X6. 30 minutes of Bailey screaming, 1 slap, and I said the appropriate yes sirs, and after that I had to park on the street. My parents had a 3-car garage, plus boat, and I was banished to the street. The next day, uncoordinated me signed up for karate. A silvery blue Hyundai Sonata pulled onto the street, passed me and my ugly truck, and pulled into the Parker driveway. Jared's car. I bit my lip, inhaled slowly, and held my breath. The wait was the best part. Jared climbed out of his car wearing his barista shirt, white and form-fitting and almost see-through. Jared Parker is my best friend, and has been since we met at Montgomery Memorial. I wanted him to be more than a best friend. I wanted him to be my boyfriend. But Jared is straight and good-looking. Life's not fair. Tan skin, light sandy hair, coffee smudges on his shirt. Jared even made the stains look good. No matter what Jared wears, he looked like one of those men on romance books. He played basketball back in high school. Not like me. He wasn't one of the freaks of high school. At least Jared doesn't know I'm gay and that I'm in love with him. He didn't realize it, but coming over here kept me sane. Some days, home was a nightmare. Hey Mitch, been here long? I pulled myself out of the melancholy. Just long enough to change the oil. You should have done that at home. You know Donna and Bailey. They're afraid that with me being around, their precious monster house will lose value. That's right. I don't call them Mom and Dad. When they stopped respecting me, I stopped respecting them. They don't deserve the titles. Jared smiled. We don't have that problem in this part of the Butte. Real estate dropped maybe 50 years ago. Parents fighting again? Yep. I grabbed my vest from the front seat with the 100 pins and buttons and patches and swung it around and pulled my arms through and turned off the music. Save the whales and save the old battery. You never did tell me about the other night. Come on in. Not much to tell, Jared said. It took too many beers to make her, interesting. She did fun things with her mouth, or tried anyway. Details. Later, pervert. And that's why you love me, I said, grabbing my backpack. I followed Jared inside into a world that was opposite Donna and Bailey's. The Parker home was cluttered with old newspapers and magazines and cookbooks, on every surface, even the hardwood floor. The living room was about the size of Donna's closet, but with a couch, an old-style TV 24-inch television. Bailey would never have something that small. Maybe he's overcompensating. The only thing big around this house is Mrs. Parker, morbidly obese with some medical condition, and one leg the size of a soccer ball. The other was only the size of a football. She can hardly walk, but every time I came over she had made something diabetic friendly. Mrs. Parker can cook, and cook some pretty amazing things. She had an extra white chair in the living room, with tables on each side of her. The remote sat on one, as well as plates of very unhealthy bits of donuts and cakes and cookies. Across the small room was an old, creaky leather sofa. My bed when I fled the monster house. Whether it was 2 in the afternoon or 2 in the morning, she never minded when I came over. She laid out the blankets on the couch and didn't ask questions. Somehow, she knew I had to escape my parents. Mrs. Parker might be big, but she was all heart. Unlike Donna, she deserved the mom title. Would Jared trade? Almost bedridden, she also watched TV 20 hours a day in her oversized recliner and spoke on her old-fashioned push-button phone for 19 hours a day. "Hey, Mitch," she said in her old smoker's voice. 2 packs a day for 20 years, and anyone can have a voice like that. She quit a few years back, but kept the voice. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Parker?" "I tried a new recipe, a low-carb keto thing for cookies with chickpea flour. See what you think," she said, holding the phone to one side. "Oh, Jared, that girl you dumped last month, or the month earlier, or whenever, called and wants to know if you would meet her at the bar tonight." Just my luck. My best friend was the straightest straight man I knew, and had sex at least twice a week. He's not quite a girl every night kind of guy. Some days he has to work the late shift. But it always felt like coming home every time I came here. I loved coming here. Thanks, Mrs. Parker. I wish I could tell Jared about me, about how I feel, about how nice it is to come over. Jared doesn't know anything about my inner life. Very few. Based on high school, it's the only thing we have ever agreed on. High school is hard. Give the kids any reason to make fun of you, and they will. Being the vampire was bad enough. High school didn't like freaks very well, even when they pretended to be hetero. Jared. Mitch was here again. Guess I couldn't blame him, not with parents like his. I would escape whenever I could, if I had Donna and Bailey for Mom and Dad. Mitch never called them Mom and Dad. First names only. To each their own. Maybe Donna and Bailey wouldn't seem so bad if Mitch was trapped in my house. Still, we were best friends, or as close a friend as Mitch would let anyone. He was a loyal friend. He talked about himself about as much as a brick would. And Mitch had no fashion sense. He always wore black skinny jeans that were ripped and slashed so much that his boxer briefs showed, and he had a collection of black vintage t-shirts and that security blanket of a vest. Never went anywhere without it, or his backpack. Of course, that's where he kept his diabetes gear. How had we become friends? We were so different. Maybe it was the first time we went out to the Overlook to look at the stars, and I told him about this girl, Chelsea, who dumped me. Mitch had an older model telescope then, before he bought the G-Skyer. The G-Skyer. Mitch always said G-Skyer. Was a German-made telescope he saved up for, and we had used it at least 100 times. We'd take that thing out to the Overlook and spend all night sometimes looking at the stars and talking. And sometimes Mitch would relax. Then, on rare occasions, he laughed. Sometimes he would be the Mitch I remembered from years ago. He'd open up, smile, and whatever bothered him disappeared. He forgot to be the vampire. I couldn't blame the kids for that nickname, though. Pale skin, always wore black, never took yearbook pictures, ever. He was the only student that had photo unavailable in every yearbook. The kids picked on him so much in high school he transferred to night school the last half of the senior year so he could graduate. Somehow we had become friends, the vampire and the ex-jock. Mitch had talked me through every single breakup. Mitch seldom spoke about himself, but he could listen. Even Mom couldn't listen that good. Hunting through the piles of clothes, I found something that smelled clean and changed into shorts and a tank and walked out of the room. Someday I would clean the place. It was the only room in the house that was carpeted, and that was because of all the shirts I had on the floor. I walked into the kitchen and tried one of the chickpea cookies. Not bad, but not my style. Mitch was back in the backyard, earbuds in, practicing some karate dance thing. The backyard was more of a junkyard of all the crap my dad collected. A couple of junker cars, old washing machines, metal car parts. Dad thought that if he waited for the right time, he'd sell the junk and turn a profit. The right time came for him to leave with another woman before he could corner the market on metal. Mitch had been studying karate for a year, maybe a little bit more, and said he was a green belt with a stripe, whatever that meant. Was a green belt close to a black belt? Well, I'm glad somebody found a hobby that really brought out the definition in those arms, and if he moved just right, the shirt tightened against lats. Really? Had Mitch been lifting weights and not said anything? Maybe it's the karate. Mitch should date more. The girls would love the arms. Probably not his hair, but definitely the arms. Mitch didn't date, but he had a life. The shyest kid in high school had more of a life than the ex-jock. Figures. I walked into the living room, gave my mom a kiss on the forehead, pulled out my phone, and walked out the door. Time to see if I had a date tonight, and check the mail. Mitch took off a little later, probably heading for anywhere but home. I climbed into my car. Something was under the windshield wiper. A condom. I stared at the wrapper and grinned. This one said it glowed in the dark. A note attached to it read, "For luck." Mitch struck again. My best friend always gave me a condom for good luck. He didn't date, but he was looking out for me. Some of the condoms he found I didn't believe existed. Fruit-flavored condoms? Really? I shrugged as I unfastened the seatbelt, climbed out, and picked up the little package. Mitch and his good luck charms.